Hey guys, what's up? It's me, MC Matador here, and today is Labor Day. I have a day off from school, and I'm sure a good chunk of you guys do as well. I'm bringing you part 7 of my Countdown Calamity series, so we only have 3 more parts after this. And this episode, we're going to start getting into some of the stuff that's good. Good coasters, good rides, quality, whatever you want to call them. We're going to start off with the Intamin Impulse Sponge. Wicked Twister at Cedar Point coming in at 60th. I mean, it's faster and taller than the other models, but I'm not a huge fan of that back spike being twisted. I like the back spikes more than the front spikes because if they're straight in line, you get some good airtime. Like massive airtime. Massive floater airtime on that back spike. Steel Venom from Valley Fair also was a new Challenger. And I honestly thought it was pretty good, but I didn't like that holding brake. Well, not really a holding brake. It just kind of clamped you and stopped your momentum for about a half second, and then you fell back to earth. It just gave you a jolt of, If it actually held you there for a little bit, it would have actually been good. And then my home park, Impulse, Great America's V2 Vertical Velocity, is my favorite of the bunch, even though Max Force makes it pretty obsolete. Oh yeah, and Max Force is not going to be on this year's list, because this list, like I said earlier, reflects the end of the 2018 season. So everything I've written in 2019 and, onward will not be on this list, as I've said before. Moving on, we have Batwing at Six Flags America. Now, Cobra's Curse, bad percentile loss. I think it was like -8 or something. Yeah, this one just coming in hot at -11 percentile loss. It is essentially 11% worse than its competitors than it was from 2016. Lesson here, kids, time can change. Time can change opinions, and time can just essentially form people's preferences, and time can just kill things, really. Riding the deceased Firehawk, which would have been on the list had it not been taken out this year, probably right after in number 56. The whole Firehawk riding back in, especially in my rides in 2017, just dampened my opinion of the whole genre of Vekoma Flying Dutchman. They're still quality rides, but they're nowhere near the hype I made them out to be 2 years ago, or 3 in this case, because it's 2019. I have covered most of my thoughts on the Vekoma Flying Dutchman in my Firehawk review and post-mortem, and I really have yet to see a reason to go back to Six Flags America, unless I'm just ever in the Baltimore, D.C. area. They have an amazing local chain over in the northern D.C. area. I think I was staying in a little town called Hyattsville when I was going there, and it was pretty good. So maybe I'll go back there, although they have one in Ann Arbor. Whatever. Lesson is, I'm probably not going to get back to ride Batwing anytime soon, and even if I do, it's probably going to come with 10-minute dispatches and another hit in the list. Moving on, we have Screamin' Eagle at Six Flags St. Louis. This is a criminally underrated, not criminally rated, criminally underrated Woody. This thing is probably, if I were to go back to St. Louis, I would see it potentially as my favorite coaster in the park. It's smooth, it's lonely, like it's just in the back of the park through the woods, has fantastic traditional like vintage floater airtime, the stuff you'd get on other PTC wooden coasters. It's, like I said, it's still smooth, and the lines are not unreasonable, like, ever. And they run 2 trains, so better than St. Louis standards already. And this is the only wooden coaster in the park that I remember that offers complimentary bins in the station, which the other 2 didn't. I went from Boss, which didn't have them, and I had to use a locker, to this, which had stations, and then to American Thunder, which didn't even allow you to go in the queue with any loose articles. So I had to leave my brother behind. This ride deserves so much more than being in this park. It's so good, and I believe it recently was just endowed with the Ace Coaster Landmark plaque, which is a very high honor, and I would love to see this thing maintained and preserved for years to come. Front row ride on this thing is absolutely excellent, but I've heard back row's even crazier because of the airtime. It's like this thing is not really properly, like it's not I don't know. I heard back row is just crazy. Like some of the wheels start coming off and whatever. Number 55 is at the same park, Six Flags St. Louis, Mr. Freeze Reverse Blast. Now, I more or less have forgotten this thing since 2015, but from what I can remember, I think it is a pretty fun yet gimmicky Premier Rides launch coaster. The backwards launch is pretty forceful, and it's my favorite ride at the park thus far by a slim margin, but a revisit, especially since I'm now living closer to St. Louis, can easily nullify the claim. So, yeah, Mr. Freeze Reverse Blast is, overall, it's a good ride, but I think it's not as quality as American Thunder or Screaming Eagle would be in a revisit to St. Louis, my first in what will likely be 4 or 5 years, if I ever go again. I have no plans to. Moving on, we have Daredevil Dive at Six Flags Over Georgia, an 11.5 percentage point loss. Another ride I criminally overrated 2 years prior, and I've really, in my opinion, has come back down to earth, especially since it's the last coaster from Gerstlauer that Six Flags will likely ever build because of their iffy relationship starting in 2013, since Gerstlauer made the trains for a new Texas Giant, which, if you don't recall, an obese woman was ejected from the seat and killed. And it was Gerstlauer. They blamed Gerstlauer for the trains and that. The capacity on this ride is a main issue. It runs 3 cars with 6 people each, 3 rows of 2, and one train on Raging Bull can take half of the capacity, or take double the capacity of Daredevil Dive. It's not a good fit for the park, but it's still quality. The vertical lift and beyond vertical drop are fun, but they're not atypical for CC enthusiasts. The ride hits home in many regards, but not exactly as hard as I hyped it up to be back in 2016. And there was a time where, just as I left the park, I did prefer this to Goliath. So now it's not even, I don't even think it's my second favorite in the park now. Moving on, we have Flight of Fear at Kings Island. Now, net losses, this one is a negative 15 percentile points net loss. I really, really enjoyed this thing in my ride back in I went to Kings Island in 2015, and then made the list in 2016 with a position at number 24 out of 104. So essentially better than about 80% of the coasters on the list. Now, the 2017 re-ride was lackluster and was kind of jerky. I kind of saw it as also forceless in areas as well. Especially now that I've ridden Rock and Roller Coaster at Disney's Hollywood Studios this year, which I'm not going to talk about. I could just say that ride puts Flight of Fear to shame with the forces. And Vekoma actually did something right for once. So I'm sorry, Premier Rides. This is 2 rides in the same episode that I just criminally overrated. Hopefully, well, not sure if West Coast Racers is even going to open in time for the end of the series. So, good luck. Moving on, we have Rougarou. And this is a first positive gain since the Impulse, or since Screaming Eagle. It is kind of rough in some spots, but I do think that Rougarou is one of those rides that gets better every time I ride it. Kind of like Batman clones. If you ride the same, like, you might see it as rough when you're young, but it gets better the more you ride it. It's a classic B&M and very forceful layout with some stellar elements that just really put some G's onto you. It might be a little rough around the edges with some headbanging in a few places, but if you know how to stop it, you can most likely enjoy this ride. And the best thing about this ride, A, barely ever has a queue, and B, is probably the most weather-resilient ride in the park. A lot of other rides at Cedar Point will shut down to weather, but I remember there was this one time last year where there were reports coming out of Cedar Point of the ride it was pissing rain during one of the Fright Fest or Hollow Weekends things, and every ride was closed except for Rougarou. Go on, you little titan. Moving on, we have the Superman Ultimate Flight clones, a slight boost of plus 3 percentage points for both of these, and the layouts and harmonic dualities is what really get me on this ride. The layout definitely is a strong suit, but not like as good as other flying coasters. I like how it goes from very forceful elements, like for the pretzel roll and zero G roll, but the grace of the hairpin turns and flying over and interaction with the terrain, grassy fields and all that. It's just harmony. I do like the ride in the back more because it's snappy. I like the more snappy ride rather than it just being a little slow towards the front. That pretzel will take the breath out of you every time, I'm going to say. And I prefer Six Flags over Georgia's Superman clone because it has actual interaction with the terrain. At one point, you even go under a tunnel with a footpath, compared to Great America, where you just fly over the queue at one point. You can flick off at people, kind of like I do when I'm just in a bad mood, but they'll probably not hear you in the first place. Moving on, we have Wild Thing, the last new challenger of the video. We'll get some more coming in parts, every other part. I did cover my thoughts on this thing pretty well in the Valley Fair countdown, but I'm going to do it again. For a hypercoaster, this thing really didn't impress me. It's a very tame ride, with minimal airtime and pretty forceless, but still enjoyable by every regards. I rode it both in the front and the back, with it being walk-ons for both rows. I will say that it might be a factor since I was riding in a near empty train to why this thing was not pulling as much forces as it should. But I'm pretty sure it's not just that. The ride's still perfectly smooth, doesn't really have any jarring moments, but really the lack of memorable moments and the lack of impactful and meaningful forces makes this one fall short of every hyper, or especially B&M hyper, ever. I will say I do prefer the back on this thing, though, for the drop alone. The drop in the back row is incredible. Moving on, we have Great Bear. Probably, in my opinion, even though I haven't ridden this thing in 5 years almost, I rode it in June of 2015, I still think it's one of the most forceless B&M inverts out there. And it's kind of bizarre. Looking at that picture in the bottom right, it just does a weird helix before going down a narrow drop. It's interesting, to say the least. I still enjoyed it quite a bit, though, and it's still a quality ride. It is definitely also a hike to get up there, and there's not really much else up there except for, the Hershey Triple Towers that were just built in 2017, and there was also there used to be some kiddie rides. There was also the Observation Tower, there might be the entrance to the zoo, whatever it is. And I'd love to go back to Hershey Park, especially since Candemonium will be opening up in 2020 for my 5 years gap. So maybe I'll get back there, maybe go to Great Adventure at the same time. That's just talking out of my butt for the moment, though. Moving on, we have Gatekeeper. Now, the next two entries will prove one point. B&M wing coasters don't really do it for me. Sorry for the text. They generally provide a forceless ride, and they're generally only kind of remedied by sitting in the back. They kind of blend together. The vest restraints aren't very good, especially the older ones. Especially for people that are taller and more broad-shouldered like me. They aren't terrible, but they kind of do hamper the overall comfort. And in certain elements, the wings just kind of bounce around like a Zimbabwean airplane. I know it's perfectly safe, but it just sometimes is like a little jarring. And Gatekeeper, it's pretty forceless. It's still a solid ride, and a solidly probably It's definitely top 10 at the park. Although Cedar Point's top 10 puts pretty much every other park to shame. I quite like it, but I don't know. It just doesn't fully do it for me, Gatekeeper. It's just especially with a net loss of 8 percentage points. And we have the other wing coaster I've ridden as of 2018 in 46th. Another negative 8 loss. Gatekeeper's main rival in the Midwest, X-Flight. Yeah, I don't have to really repeat myself, but I feel like X-Flight is somehow more jarring than Gatekeeper, but does provide a more compact and forceful layout. It just, in that 0G stall, the long inline, not a stall, but it's a long inline twist, actually. It does a really good job. I really like that element. The wing over drop is fantastic, especially in the back row. The elements are all, they kind of mesh together. The ride is quite short, but I think it does provide more forces and more intense layout than Gatekeeper at the cost of some smoothness in the wings. And that is the last coaster of Part 7 of the 150 coaster countdown Calamity. I'll see you guys with Part 8 maybe within the next week or two. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscription. Happy Labor Day for anyone watching on the day it's uploaded. And as always, I wish you guys peace.